And welcome to Catholics Coast to Coast, a good chance for us to really catch up on what conversations around the world that others are having that we can easily be a part of at Podcast Central when you go to EWTN.com/podcast and then take them with you, share them with your friends, and know that you're deepening your walk and your better understanding of God in the process. I'm Ace McKay, here for the journey, and as we do each and every week, we look at the Mass readings as we check in on your word on the Word.
If you have ever been around young kids, you may have realized that they are filled with questions. Can I go outside? What's that over there? Can I have a toy?
You know who doesn't ask a lot of questions?
Who?
The disciples in this Sunday's Gospel. In this passage from Mark, Christ was trying to teach the disciples, and they just weren't getting it.
Jesus was explicitly foreshadowing his death and resurrection. Not only did the disciples not understand what he was saying, but they were also too afraid to ask questions.
I have a question. Why were they afraid?
Mark doesn't say. Maybe they couldn't fathom that the all-powerful Messiah would die, or maybe they simply didn't want to know. Whatever the reason was, they decided not to inquire Jesus about it and discussed which of them was the greatest.
Which resulted in Jesus giving them another lesson. If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be the last of all and the servant of all.
This week, we challenge you to reflect on those questions that you may be too afraid to ask God. Pray for the courage to ask those questions.
Remember, he is a good and gracious God, and he wants you to talk to him.
And we'll see you here next time here on The Word on the Word. Bye!
Great reflections help us to understand God's Word better. So more from Word on the Word, easy to find at EWTN.com/podcast, or just subscribe wherever you like to stream. I'm Ace McKay. As Catholics Coast to Coast continues, we're going to check in on the Catholic Momcast as we find out ways to discuss the challenges and the support groups that are available for those who are separated or divorced Catholics. So Maria and Janelle helping to bring the conversation together this week as we check in on the Catholic Momcast with Catholics Coast to Coast.
Welcome to the Catholic Momcast. Join us each week as our friends from CatholicMom.com and special guests gather to chat about all things faith, family, and fun. From the latest news in our community to the latest trends in our homes, we invite you to join the conversation.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Catholic Momcast. I'm your host, Maria Johnson, and as part of our continuing series spotlighting our Catholic Mom contributors, today's guest is Janelle Paraguay, an Associate Director in the Office of Family Life and Spirituality at the Diocese of San Diego. Oh my goodness, who wouldn't want to be there? And besides Catholic Mom, Janelle's writing has been featured in Grotto Network and America Magazine. Welcome, Janelle. We're so grateful for all you do at Catholic Mom, but you do so much more in your life. So would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Well, first of all, Maria, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to talk about the divorced and separated Catholic community today, and a little bit about me personally. Shock of shocks, I'm a mom. I've got a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Oh, great ages.
Both boys. So a lot of Hot Wheels cars that I slip on daily. My husband and I have been married 10 years, and we live in Carlsbad, which is North San Diego County, close to Legoland, for those of you that may be interested in that factoid. And I'm a lifelong Californian.
I love it. I love it. Listen, Legoland, you talked about kicking the Hot Wheels, but how many Legos do you have?
Well, considering as I was walking upstairs to come and talk with you, I barefoot step on one. So that answers that question.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. I was in Anaheim for a conference some years ago and went to the Disney Village. We didn't go in. We didn't have time to go into Disneyland, but we went to the village to have dinner, and they have a Lego store there.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the most, I don't know if it's still up, but they had a dragon that came up the side of the building. And I was like, wow, this is your generation's version of those stupid little bears that we used to collect in the 80s and 90s. I can't remember even what they were, but it was just one collectible after another. How fun.
I'm trying to convince my 7-year-old that he doesn't need the set. He can actually just use his imagination to create whatever he wants. That's what we're aiming for these days.
And that's excellent. That's excellent. Well, I'm so happy that you've joined us. And I think this is going to be a very special episode because we were just talking before the show how the topic of divorce is something that is so prevalent
Mhm.
in so many families. It's not as rare as it once was. Um, and so it's time that we openly have some good conversations about how to look at divorce with a Catholic lens and how to do it with love. And
Mhm.
so we're just absolutely pleased to have you here today.
Mhm.
So could you tell us a little bit about what your ministry to separated and divorced Catholics entails?
Yeah, so my background is in ministry, and I should say transparency first off the bat. I'm not personally divorced. I grew up in a divorced family. My parents divorced when I was 7. They separated when I was 6. So we moved in. My mom, brother, and I moved in with my maternal grandparents after their separation. And so that is the lens that I bring to my ministry. Um, And basically, one of the things that happened here in the Diocese of San Diego is that we had a family life synod in 2016 to mirror what was happening at the Vatican level. And one of the things that came out from all the parishes, all our 90 something parishes being represented, was a really strong need for divorce ministry. And so my position was born out of that. And one of the things that when I applied, I had that, um, just hesitation because I'm not personally divorced. But on the other hand, this has been part of my life journey. And when I accepted the position, one of the things that I learned first and foremost is that Catholics working in this space are the most amazing ministers. There's nothing about the divorce process which comes with every level of grief. It is essentially the grieving process for a loss of a marriage um, that doesn't necessitate empathy and compassion. So I have learned so much from parish level ministers, other diocesan ministers who have been working in this space, because it is truly ultimately about healing.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it impacts I mean, obviously it impacts the
Mhm.
couple
Mhm.
immediately, but there are children involved, there's extended family
Mhm.
involved, there's a lot of dynamics in not only the divorce itself, but in what follows and how,
Mhm.
and how people carry forward. So I think that's a beautiful, beautiful ministry. What can we do at the parish level to be more welcoming
Yeah.
to separated and or divorced families? I know, even,
Mhm.
maybe you're working in a Catholic school, there's still a stigma attached
Mhm.
to divorce.
Mhm. Absolutely. And first of all, we need to be honest about it. We have to be honest that that stigma still exists. Let's not pretend that it's not there, because that's denying the reality that many of our divorce separated Catholics experience. I've had um, participants of our programs tell me sometimes it feels like walking around with a big D on your
Mm,
t-shirt.
yeah.
Um, and so one of the things that when I sit down and meet with a pastoral team, meet with a pastor, one of the things that I stress is it's about visibility. It's about, you know, being realistic that, statistically, American Catholics divorce at the same rate as Americans, which is still about 1 in 2. Now, that number drops for couples that regularly attend church together, but we're still talking about a pretty high percentage of those of sitting in our Catholic parishes. So let's be aware of that first and foremost. Um, but I think so much of it is just thinking about, how we can be of service in small ways. Like, can we occasionally as a parish offer an annulment workshop explanation? Can we include divorced and separated families in our prayers of the faithful regularly? Can we think about things we can do for single parent support? Are our big adults only parish events, do they have free childcare? Because that is so essential. And it's really heartbreaking for me to see how often that there are divorced Catholic parents that really want to participate more in their parish, but simply just don't have the childcare. And, I think another thing is we could go bigger. We could certainly, there are lots of great programs out there. So you could run a divorce support group at your parish. But for me, first and foremost, it's that transparency. It's including, even if it's our divorced and separated Catholics, in programming, regular programming in the church, and then occasionally doing something else. Maybe it's a healing mass. Maybe it's, yeah. I mean, it doesn't,
Like that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be something that, everyone scrambles to create a whole new ministry. Just have to be thoughtful about the ministries we already have and how they can be inclusive.
Yeah, and that applies really across the board to just how we should approach our ministry at the parishes, because we all want to be seen, whatever it is that we're bringing to the table, and I guess that's kind of a trendy word, or maybe that's an old word. Who knows? At my age, language changes much faster than I can adapt to it. But the idea of recognizing that there are divorced and separated members of our community who could just need to be seen, who need to be acknowledged, that they are also a welcomed part of the community. I didn't even think about praying for people like that in the prayers of the faithful. So that's lovely.
Again,
Wow.
so simple.
And it goes beyond having, small children too, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that isn't talked about for the adult children of divorce, of which you are, in that group. How do we approach that, or what kind of support can we give those adult children? What needs to change in that area?
Yeah, I mean, this is a personal note, but when I was in my 20s, Maria, I struggled a lot my dating life. I had some negative associations from my parents' relationship, and it led me to be kind of aloof and standoffish in my dating life. And that was something that I needed to heal from. Like, I needed to recognize in myself, I needed to work on it. I went to therapy. And I think a lot of adults from divorced families have similar challenges in relating to others, and recognizing that marriage is a beautiful sacrament, that God really brings two people together. And so I always kind of, from my family life, diocesan perspective, I spend a lot of time talking to marriage preparation ministers.
Oh, and that's such an obvious connection, because you are bringing to the table some wounds, right? Some misconceptions, and maybe even the feeling that you're doomed to repeat the same, right?
Or the opposite is true, is that you kind of perpetually enter kind of serial monogamy, but doesn't go into the depth.
Oh,
yeah. And stays kind of
marriage.
surface level. Yeah. So
Yeah.
go
ahead.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that is, every adult from divorced families experience, but I just think that it's something that, we as a Catholic community have to really encourage a healing of those wounds. And there are some great programs out there. I'm a big fan of the lay apostolate Life Giving Wounds, which does retreats for adults from divorced families. But in that healing comes that recognition that, we're all called to harmony. We're all called to love, and we're all deserving of love, no matter what our experience has been with that.
Amen. That's beautiful. So how does your work at the Diocese of San Diego let you develop these things? I mean, they're all beautiful ideas. What are some things at the diocesan level that are going on?
Yeah, it's funny. I jokingly sometimes refer to it as divorce triage
Oh my goodness.
because I get calls, usually from individuals that are at one of the lower points in the divorce process.
Mhm.
And I just want to make sure that they are, whatever programs are upcoming, either at a parish level, maybe that's a 10 weeks divorce support program. Maybe it's a retreat. So there's a wonderful ministry that's national, but not in every diocese, called Beginning Experience, which was started by a religious sister and a divorced woman. And it's Beginning Experience is a weekend retreat for anyone grieving the loss of marriage. So that's someone who's divorced, separated, or widowed. And sometimes those populations don't necessarily think that they would immediately connect, but the reality is it is a grieving process, and there are going to be some similar dynamics.
Mhm.
And so that's an example of a beautiful program.
I love that. If I could just interrupt you real
Yeah.
quick, I love that terminology. I like the way that it's framed, that you're grieving the loss of a marriage. So much in the culture is, calling it a failed marriage or calling it, the suffering from divorce. But this really reframes it into something that you can heal from.
And one of the things that has been really striking to me in this ministry, Maria, is how many individuals that I've had the privilege of meeting through divorce support programs have come to me at a point where maybe they weren't regularly attending church. Maybe they didn't have a strong connection to their faith, but they were in a space where they were just so needing something, and they knew it was bigger than them. And they found their way, as maybe a Christmas Easter Catholic, to a Catholic divorce support program.
Mhm.
And seeing their growth through their healing, seeing someone tell me, I went adoration for the first time, like just learning about the gifts of our faith tradition in terms of staying in touch with the sacraments, being reassured that the sacrament of reconciliation isn't as scary as some of us, have assumed since our second grade, like opinions of it, and that has been, for me, one of the most amazing things, is seeing so many people grow in their faith through this grieving process and coming closer to God in that healing. Like, it's just, again, like, God's ways are so much bigger than ours.
And he's so merciful and loves us so dearly.
Mhm.
I'm so heartened by hearing this. In my generation, most people just walked away from the church.
Mhm.
Um, whether or not they pursued an annulment or whether annulments weren't granted or whatever, they just stepped away from the faith, and that is a bigger tragedy even than what loss that they may be grieving, because it's the biggest loss of all.
Mhm.
So it's beautiful to see that our church is really opening up and
Mhm.
and being this level of proactive and not reactive in keeping the faithful in the pews, but keeping the faithful close to our Lord.
Yeah, amen. I mean, there's nothing more beautiful than a group of individuals who have, been through the ringer,
Mm-hmm.
come together and form new relationships with God as the center.
That's beautiful. Well, and there's there's a lot. There are a lot of articles that you've written for Catholic Mom. I want to just redirect our listeners to the show notes to see those articles, because they really are instructional, encouraging, consoling. And so we're definitely going to have those in the show notes. But there's so much more to you than that. You are also a Catholic mom. Tell us about your boys. You shared with me that that one of your boys was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder last year. And so what's that journey been like for you?
Yeah, our 5-year-old was diagnosed last year. We recognized some speech delays when he was about 3. But what a lot of people told us, because he's a COVID baby, was, oh yeah, there's a lot of speech delays in general, so it took us about another year to actually get him diagnosed. And it's definitely been a learning curve, as all of our special ed moms and dads can attest. Feel like I learn a new acronym every week or every day sometimes.
To be replaced next week by a new and improved one. I'm a retired educator, and one of my daughters is also a teacher, and I half of the things that she's talking about, I'm like, huh? What? It's all new, but it is all new, and it's wonderful that you have a diagnosis. I guess he must be entering kindergarten, right? Or in kindergarten?
He started kindergarten 2 weeks ago.
Oh my goodness. How fun. How's he doing?
A big blessing for us is that because of his diagnosis, we were able to get him into a special ed TK program last year.
Oh, good.
That he did for a few hours a week, and he made a best friend.
Oh, beautiful.
And they thankfully were placed in the same class.
Is that good or bad? I don't
No, it made the transition wasn't seamless to kindergarten, but it was much easier being able to point out that he was going to be able to play with his friend. So
oh, that's sweet. That's sweet.
So that warms our hearts. And honestly, like, one of the big blessings for me in this process has been really learning to appreciate other parents that have already been on this journey. Like, I just had coffee this week with a friend of a friend who I'd never met, whose daughter is in middle school, and she just took time out of her day to sit down and say, you're going to be okay. Your son's going to be okay. It's a journey, and there are going to be some hard moments. But having a sense of that community that seemingly has come out of the woodworks has been just, as I said, such an incredible blessing, and I'm so grateful. I feel a lot of, in the process of my son getting diagnosed and us, finding resources, and I've just felt so many God moments.
Oh, beautiful.
Like, I know that that God was looking down, because there's no way that, I would have been introduced to someone and, without just a sense that my family's being held. So.
Oh, that's lovely. And it's kind of sticking with our previous point about this idea of being seen, of being embraced instead of rejected. And I think that that's so important, especially moving forward. As he grows older. And so how's Big Brother? He's typical.
Yeah, typical kiddo. That's been a challenge. He struggles to understand why we've been, having to put a lot of energy and time into our little guy. But My 7-year-old is, on his path to his first communion this year, which we're super excited
Oh,
about. So that's
sweet.
gives us a great opportunity to really celebrate him and his ongoing development. And so, yeah, we're looking forward to that.
Oh, well, I love that. What a lovely family with two boys, huh? Your mom boy?
It's never boring, I'll tell you that.
Well, and there's yet more to you, right? Here comes another level. I feel like we're always in when we're doing the contributor shows, I feel like we're always like the Shrek moment, peeling up the onion, trying to find out everything about our contributors that we can. You are working on a novel. Is that right? Or did you finish it?
Oh no, it's nowhere near finished. But yeah, I have just decided that I'm going for it in my copious amounts of spare time.
Right.
So yeah, it's fiction, which is very new for me actually. So I'm kind of learning the fine tuning, like understanding, placing plot points and character development, but it's basically a fictionalized version of my grandparents' love story. So the grandparents referenced earlier that we moved in with after my parents divorced.
Yeah.
My grandfather was a GI in World War II. He was sent to Oxford, England. And he met my grandmother at a Red Cross dance. She was a local girl. And so
Stop. It sounds like
yeah,
that's gonna be great.
It was really cool. Oh yeah, there's so many cool side stories to their story, but basically the short version is that my grandfather was redeployed to France. He had asked her to marry him. She was really nervous about moving to the United States. And so he wrote her every week. He said, no, we're supposed to be together. Yeah, you want to marry me, like da-da-da-da. And finally, he got really mad one week. And she wrote him back really, really faithfully. But he was like, okay, I've had enough. Like, clearly you're not the one. And then 2 days later, her response to his previous letter arrived. And she said, you're right. We can't live without each other. Let's get married.
Oh no. So
talk about reconciliation. He had to get used to the I'm sorry's very early on.
Oh, that's hilarious. Oh, what a great story.
Yeah.
So, well, I will be watching out for you to see what your progress is. And you know that we have lots of editors and writers among our contributors. So that's beautiful. How fun.
And Maria, can I just say I have to give a big shout out of gratitude to the whole Catholic mom community, because I started writing as a contributor, I think in 2020. So definitely looking in the early pandemic timing for a beautiful outlet. And for me, in the last few years, writing has become that's become kind of my my centering wonderful experience as a mom and as with all my other things going on. So just so much gratitude for the community who's been so encouraging, and just a shout out to all the other contributors, because we're a great set of people.
Yeah, we are. I'll take it on behalf of the whole group. But also what a blessing you are, and all the contributors are to our readers, who find themselves in some of the things that we write. So it's a beautiful ministry for sure. Well, we're so glad to have gotten to know you a little bit. Maybe you'll come back and share some more another time. Where can we find you in the meantime? Where can we read more about the work that you do and your own writing?
My blog, which will be included in the show notes, is Faithfully Irreverent. And my actually a great source of information is the Diocese of San Diego website. And you can look us up under the Pastoral Office, Family Life and Spirituality, of the whole gamut of what we do to serve families, pastorally and otherwise.
Oh, that's terrific. And they will be in the show notes. So thank you for joining us, Janelle. It was great talking to you. And thank you, listeners. God bless you.
Challenges and support for those separated or divorced Catholics. You can find out more with that conversation at Catholic Momcast when you either check out EWTN.com/podcast or just find Catholic Momcast wherever you like to stream. I'm Ace McKay. When Catholics Coast to Coast returns, the Catholic Man Show is actually helping us in the difficult moments that we acknowledge when we've missed opportunities when making a major life choice. So this week, we're discussing how that aligns with not only our vocation, but then also the calling, the role models that we can become as husbands, fathers, community leaders. We'll get into that with the Catholic Man Show next on Catholics Coast to Coast.
The destination for great Catholic audio programming is EWTN Podcast Central, featuring the best of EWTN radio, as well as faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates across the nation, all in one place, all free. If it's central to the faith, you can find it on EWTN Podcast Central. It's like podcast heaven. Visit EWTN.com/radio/podcasts today.
Welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. David Niles here with Adam Minahan, sipping on a little bit of Kalila Scotch, little product nicknamed Step Forward Inhabitant. Don't really know what that means. That is, in fact, what it's called. Product of the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, who still does not sponsor our show.
But it should.
I think they should. Just keep waiting for somebody who knows somebody over there. They're like, hey, these guys drink your stuff all the time.
If you are a Catholic,
should sponsor them.
Have some connections, hook us up.
Yeah. Even if they just like want to send us an email that says, hey, thanks. That'd be cool.
Yeah. We'd take that.
Be more than nothing.
Yeah, we'd take that.
So this next week is one of my favorite feast days. The Holy Name of Mary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's on September 12th, which is
the birthday of the croissant.
Calendar says Thursday. So we've done a whole podcast on this and just the awesome piece of history that this is. But it's a feast day. It's the part deux of, I think that's how you say two. Maybe it's not. Part 2 of Battle of Lepanto.
Yes.
If you don't know about the Battle of Lepanto, you should go look it up. If you're a Catholic, you got to know about Lepanto. Part 2, the Turks came back. They have Vienna under siege. Vienna had a big wall, so like they were holding up behind their wall. The Holy League is kind of like falling apart a little bit. The Holy League that came together at Lepanto.
Vienna.
No, at Lepanto, the Holy League came together.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
So here in Vienna, nobody's really sending their armies because they're afraid they're all going to get wiped out, and then there's going to be no one to guard France. Except for the Polish, they come. The Turks were massively outnumbering. I mean, there's just the thing about the Turks at the time is like there's just a lot of them. The Polish show up with their winged hussar cavalry unit, and before they left Poland, they made sure they left intentionally. They departed from Our Lady of Czestochowa, the shrine there. They arrive at the battlefield and immediately say, "We will wipe them out easily. We will defeat them easily." They invoke the Holy Name of Mary, charge into battle, and rout the Turks. The Turks fled, and so as they were going through their spoils of war, they found all these coffee beans, which at the time was exclusively a Muslim drink. Mm-hmm. And some of the local Venetian bakers started baking rolls in the shape of the Muslim flag, the crescent moon. And thus the croissant was born.
Croissant.
This is the birthday of the croissant on the feast day of Holy Name of Mary. And so it began a very, at this point, ancient Catholic tradition on the Holy Feast of Mary, September 12th, to eat croissants and drink coffee. This is one of my favorite office days of evangelization, because what I do is I go to like the baker, like a nice bakery in town. I'll go get like 20 croissants.
All delicious.
In like the culture of the office, and it's like, it's got a little bit weird during COVID, but it's kind of still this way. It's like if you have like donuts or rolls or something in a box that's open, just like out somewhere. It's like, obviously this is to share, right? So people, I'll have them like right there by my desk, and people say, oh, these, can I have one of these? And like, yeah. Did you know this is the birthday of the croissant? And they'll be like, no way. It's like, can I tell you the story?
And you're like, Yahweh.
And they're like starting to eat this delicious croissant. And they're like, sure, let me hear about the birthday of the croissant. And I'm like, boom. You're Venice, 1552 or what, I forget what exactly the date is. And it's like, so anyway, it's like, it comes down to the croissant, coffee, and 9/11, all coming down to the same thing, because it is believed that 9/11, September 11th, they attacked on that day, hearkening back to the Battle of Vienna, because that was the last day that the Turks, the Muslims, were in possession of the West, right? That at that moment, they were in charge of Europe, and that they were going to, if this battle had gone differently, Christianity may have been wiped out, right? Which God obviously is not going to allow to happen, but
maybe very small.
it could have been really tough.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just a great story about
when they attacked John Paul II, a Polish.
He immediately recognized what they were doing, and the Feast of the Holy Name of Mary had fallen off the universal calendar. So that next day after 9/11, he reinstituted the Feast of the Holy Name of Mary onto the universal calendar again, which is why we're now why we celebrate it in our liturgies again.
Yeah.
So it's just a great story because it's rooted in so much Catholic tradition. It's just a beautiful story of victory, especially through the intercession of Our Lady, and it has such modern day relevance with its ties to the tragedy of 9/11. So don't forget.
Don't shy away from.
Go get your croissant and coffee, and
evangelize,
and join in with us in this ancient, excellent Catholic tradition.
Food and drink is a great way to enter into the heart of man and plumb the depths of what he's called to be.
Yeah, because it is one of those things. You're not just sitting there eating a croissant and drinking coffee. The act of doing it in this intentional way kind of makes you, like, as you're eating this croissant, at least I always do this, it's like, oh man, because you're participating in this tradition, and it kind of makes you think back about the way that, like, the Lord in providence has organized, and how he just arranges things in order that his church might thrive, even though it might not always seem like it's thriving to us, but a croissant and coffee all of a sudden now is a good holy reminder of all these things.
That's right. Okay, so the episode today, how much time? I can't see the computer at all, so do we have time?
Yes.
Okay. The episode of today, I may or may not call it, what I called the title of the notes that I sent you was Necessary Sacrifices, the Death of Certain Goods.
I like it. It's a good title, I think.
And the reason why I was thinking about this is that I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine about 2 weeks ago, maybe. And I was talking to him. We were going to have he was over and we were going to have dinner. And I was like, hey, you want a beer? And he's like, no, I'm good. And I'm like, okay, no problem. I opened one and, we were just in there talking. And then a couple days later, we were out and about, and someone asked him if he wanted a beer, and he's like, no, I'm good. And so I asked him, I said, like, I've had beers with you before. Like, are you on a fast? Or like, well, tell me, what are you doing? And he said, no, I'm not. Well, I mean, I am on a fast for it because I just felt like that it was consuming my life. And I realized that I was making a lot of excuses for this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized I had to kill it. And I was like very, I don't want to say proud, but like I was like, that is that,
you admired it.
I admired it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the admiration for that stance was very high. And then it got me thinking about just other goods that we sacrifice all the time because we're doing ascetic practices through Ace 90 and all this other stuff. And I remember our good friend Sortier-Lange, however you say his name, from the book The Intellectual Life, which I cannot recommend enough. We've talked about the book many times on the show. Cannot recommend it enough. But I remember underlining a few things in that book. So I went back and looked at it. And one of the things he talks about is like, it's a painful thing to say to oneself, by choosing one road, I'm turning my back on 1,000 others. Mm-hmm. And like, that really resonates with me, right? Because there's things which, if you have any kind of entrepreneurial mindset, or you have any type of extrovert tendencies, or you have any desires, like if you have natural inclinations to do a lot of things, this is a hard sentence to really take in, because by choosing certain roads, you're saying no to a lot of other things.
Right. Yeah, you're saying no to thousands of others, like he says. You know, our good buddy Eric Graylis, his wife wrote an article in a Eastern Oklahoma Catholic magazine years ago, and it was all about this concept of something has to die. And it really made an impact on me. And just, she was talking about this very thing, about as you progress in the spiritual life, in like thinking about it in terms of like, you have to place things on the altar, because, worship actually means you're making a sacrifice. You know, you were killing something. Mm-hmm. A lot of modern notions of worship, and it's like, oh, we get together and sing songs. It's like, well, historically, biblically, that's not worship.
Right.
Okay,
it's praise.
That's like blessing the Lord,
right.
But it's actually not worship. Worship was always the offer of a life, and an altar was to kill something, right? Mm-hmm. And that's like, we don't think about that, but if you imagine, because we are finite creatures with limited capacity. Mm-hmm. We have to make choices, and we have to be intentional, and think about the choices we make, what we have time for, who is it that we want to be? What kind of man do I want to be?
And who do I want to spend it with?
Who do I want to spend it with? What kind of things am I going to be proud to offer, have looked back and said, this is how I offered my time? Because every minute of our time is sort of a sacrifice, if you think about the sacrifice being the things I didn't do. Mm-hmm. What did I say yes to? Okay. Right. And we should think about that way. Instead of saying no to things, we should be saying yes, and therefore sacrificing all of these other things. But just the notion that, okay, you have things, some of them are good things that you want to do.
Necessary sacrifices.
The certain death of certain goods.
And it actually kind of harkens back to our last episode when we're talking about stability. We're talking about, the stability even in vacation, which is almost sounds like an oxymoron, but it's not. You can go back and listen to that show. But the vow of stability implies saying no to wandering desires or inclinations or other paths that you desire. I mean, this is, the vow of stability that the Benedictines take, right? Mm-hmm. For this, they're saying yes to this way of stability. I'm going to be here. And by being here, I'm not going to do anything else. I'm not moving. Yeah. I'm not going anywhere else. I'm going to be here. I
think that's a good example. You think about the beauty of creation and just the beauty that's found all across the world, that they are putting on that altar to sacrifice. They're embracing what is here, mm-hmm. and therefore, you have to put something to death. They're putting to death for their own selves the beauty, the creation, the beauty of all other creation. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Saint Benedict actually talks about this very beautifully in his rule, the Benedictine rule. He talks about prefer nothing to the love of Christ, and this is something he says all the time, right? Prefer nothing to the love of Christ, and he says like this encapsulates the idea of saying no to anything that takes precedence over one's relationship with God.
Dude, this is so hard.
I mean,
like this, this is what the saints do, right? And sometimes as you're going about your life, and I feel this way sometimes, like there are people that I know who are much holier than me. And, I'll see them kind of like, recoiling from certain ideas or going places. It's like, there's nothing wrong with going here. Mm-hmm. But I've just seen this in these people where it's like, yeah, but there's something better, mm-hmm. And I just find myself getting caught up in that mentality of like, well, this is nothing wrong here.
Right.
And there isn't. And it's good even, but like when I reflect on that in my own heart, I realize that Are you rationalizing? Kind of. I don't know that I'm even aware of it. I don't know if it's a rationalization. Maybe it is, or was in my past, and I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, I've gotten accustomed, whatever. I don't know. And often it's little things, but realizing that's like, oh, the thing is, I like this more. Right. But I know when I reflect on it and examine my own conscience that if I'm serious about saying I want to become holy,
I want to prefer nothing.
Right. That, oh yeah. Christ. Okay. Cause I can sit here and say like, yes, sign me up for that. Right. Prefer nothing to Christ until actually that moment comes. And then actually I prefer thousands of things to him. Right. Sadly. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, if you don't examine your conscience on a regular basis, you're not going to be aware of that. Right. And it's like, well, I'm aware of some of it. I hope soon to by God's grace to like maybe make some progress. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but like, so Sartiolon just talks about this. He says like, you cannot imagine to do everything in your life. You can't imagine doing everything. He says, because we're creatures, we have limits. We're not limitless creatures, right? Mm-hmm. That we have to have access actually to our limitations. Because he says that's actually part of the virtue of humility, and gives us this great dignity, which I think is really interesting. Like this great dignity of man by recognizing his limitations. Mm-hmm. But it's it's because like you're living in a court of saying like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm living by the law, but then I'm also only playing a certain part in the common good, in the common whole. Yeah, I mean that is one of the things that makes human life so beautiful, in that we will die. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not we don't have on earth here infinite time to do all things. It's not like, oh, hey, that can wait. Mm-hmm. I'll get around to being virtuous. Right. It's like, no, there's no getting around to it. It's you might not have time to get around to it. But Bon Jovi said it best. It's now or never. You ain't gonna live forever. That's right. And it has a way of making life sacred, because you have so many days set apart on this earth, right? And because of that, they're more precious. That's right. In fact, there's one time I knew I was going to the deathbed of somebody that I knew very well. And he was also not Catholic. In fact, I wasn't even positive if he was baptized. And did you take water with you? I did. Yes. I'm not going to be culpable for this, for being unprepared. I was so ready. Yeah. But I stopped off by a priest friend of ours, Father Michael Pratt. He's been on our show. He's in Rome. But when he was here in the States, in Tulsa, I stopped off and asked him, I said, like, hey, what should I do here? Like, priests have a lot more experience being deathbed, either conversions or deathbed, just being by their side. I have not personally had a lot of experience on deathbeds. And he gave me great advice. He said, just talk to him and ask him what he's proud of. Ask him like what he is happy that in his life, that he accomplished in his life. Like, what are you most proud of? And let him talk about that. And like kind of understand where he is, what he's doing, and that actually probably played a bigger role in like just my spiritual life than it did for that moment. Because it made me start thinking about like, well, what am I proud of? What am I going to be proud of? What do I have? What do I have to say for the X amount of years that I've been living on this earth? And so it goes back to saying like, listen, there are a lot of things I would love to do. I would love to write. I would love to be able to like write books. I don't have the time to write books. Right. I'm not the best writer. There's plenty of other people out there who are better than me at writing books, and can do it way faster than I can. It's not in the best interest for me to do that for myself, for the common good, for my family. At least not just because you want to. Right. I mean, if you felt called to do it, then it would be worth doing. But
I would love to do it.
But the difference, there's an important difference there.
Right. Yeah.
Because on the one hand, it's like, oh, I just, I wish I was a good writer. Mm-hmm. I want to be a good writer. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's not me following the highest good.
Right.
That's me following my own desires.
Right.
Even though being a good writer that's a good.
Of course.
It's a great good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a great writer, but I enjoy writing, and I think I'm okay at it. I think I could get better at it and polish my skills and be even better. But anyway, I'm just using that as an example, right? Of that's just not what I'm called to do right now, and so I have to put death to that, so that way I can do a greater good that God is calling me to. And when you get into the the business world, or you get into just even your family life of organizing and ordering your family of what are we going to do and not do as a family, you have to understand, my son has a lot of talents. He can do a lot of different things. But we're going to have to limit to only one or two for the greater good of the family.
Right.
And for him, because he needs to do that well. In fact, that kind of goes into what Benedict and Sergeant Lunge actually talks about. He says that you have to measure yourself, and do this examination of conscience, like you were talking about, and says you measure your task. What are you trying to accomplish? And after you have these experiments and you understand how long it takes, or maybe the ROI, what you're called to, in relationship with your vocation, you have to make up your mind and accept your limits and say, listen, the things that I'm good at require my concentration. And this is what the beauty of the concentration leads to contemplation aspect, right? That even Sergeant Lunge talks about this as well. And
does he?
The Montessori.
Yeah,
it talks about as well. I mean, that's kind of their mantra, right? Yeah. That concentration leads to contemplation.
Not just Montessori, but I know Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, which is
that's right.
Maria Montessori program.
Yeah, and so the time that you have to make an impact, right, in your vocations of whatever, should require your time and strength in concentration, right? This is why we talked about this one time, and I didn't convey it very well, but when you get older and you progress, and even in the business world or your experience in the priest world, whatever it is, your experience, you're not actually getting paid for the amount of hours you work. You're getting paid by your skill, your knowledge, your experience.
Or if you're a priest, you're just not getting paid at all.
But you have a great retirement plan.
It's really good. That's true. The deferred comp is excellent.
Yes. But you're getting paid more for your experience, right?
Right.
And so you have to ask, okay, the times that I have to be the best husband, the best father, the best businessman, the best to live out these vocations that I have, the leaders in my community, it requires my time and strength and energy. When I'm walking into adoration tomorrow morning, when I walk into adoration in the morning, it requires my time, strength, and energy to be concentrating in prayer. And I can give all of it, and try my best for 3 seconds to concentrate, and then for another 3 seconds try to concentrate, and then for another 3 seconds try to concentrate as I continually lose concentration. But
that's the only way I am ever able to do it.
Right. But it's the desire, and I'm giving myself completely to this one thing to be excellent at it.
And not only having a desire, but moving, actually acting upon it. Because it's I wish I have this desire to pray, but I'm not even going to try.
Right. This is what moves you forward in what God calls you to do in life, right? By this focus and energy in prayer.
Exploring the concept of sacrificing certain desires for a greater purpose. More from the Catholic Man Show, easy to find at Podcast Central when you go to EWTN.com/podcast. And remember, you can also subscribe wherever you like to stream. That way, no matter where you are or what you're doing, you can always take a conversation and share it with others and then draw from that influence as well. I'm Ace McKay. That's going to wrap up my time with you this week, but we'll do it again next weekend. Remember, you can check out more at EWTN.com/podcast, or even when you download our mobile app, make sure you check out EWTN Extra. In the meantime, remember to let God define who you are, and I'll see you again with Catholics Coast to Coast.